Hey y'all, today we're going to do a getting started video on REW Wizard on macOS. Um, I started to make a video on how to take measurements for use with multi-sub optimizer MSO, and realized that some folks out there might not even know how to use REW at a basic level. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that really quickly. Whoops, wrong button. So what are we going to do? Well, what is REW Wizard? So REW Wizard is room acoustic software. It allows us to take all kinds of different measurements of our rooms, and then we can use that to help figure out, what kind of things that we're hearing, what things we might want to address. It's really great software. It is provided for free. I do suggest you make a donation to John. I'm sure he puts a ton of work in it, and just for the simple reason that I get a ton of value out of it. I did make a donation over to John myself, so please consider doing the same. It's definitely worth the donation for it. So we're going to talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it. You can use these Google terms to find some of the guides here. I will also link them in the video description, so they're easier to find. We're going to talk a little bit about REW Wizard, though. The first part of this guide is really going to go through the Enrico Claudio macOS guide. And then the second part is going to go through just the measurements portion of Austin Jerry's REW Wizard guide. And again, I'll link those in the video description. So today we're going to learn to install and configure REW Wizard on macOS. I'm going to walk through some of the required equipment. We're going to go through setting up the software on macOS and then taking some measurements. So what are we doing? Well, we all want better sound, and that's what we're doing. Is we're going to use REW Wizard. We're going to see how to use REW Wizard to take measurements of our room. I'm not going to go through every single type of measurement that's out there and how to interpret every measurement and things like that. That's a good exercise, I think, for you folks to go through. That's really one of the main things that I got out of Austin Jerry's guide, is how to use things like a waterfall graph, how to use things like a spectrogram and an impulse graph to figure out what am I hearing and what do I need to do about it. So this is all about getting better sound in our rooms. I just kind of really walk through this a little bit. Do we have a null, or do we have a peak that we've just grown accustomed to and we don't realize that it's way louder or way quieter at certain areas? Are those things that we need to address? Do we have really bad reflections coming off of the back of our room or coming off the front of our room that we want to try to figure out where we should put some acoustic panels? And more importantly, are the changes that we're making improving the situation, or are they actually making it worse? I know I've screwed up a few times and put the wrong setting in the wrong place, and then I go and I'm like, man, that doesn't sound right. Before REW Wizard, it just didn't sound right. After REW Wizard, I can see exactly what's wrong, go back and double check things. It makes it much easier. I think some of the most common use cases for REW Wizard are doing subwoofer alignment and EQ. There's a ton of videos out there on that are really great. Finding problematic reflections is one that I've mentioned. I use that in my room. Austin Jerry walks through the string trick, which is another option to the mirror trick to finding reflections. And then you can actually get hard data out of REW Wizard to figure out if you're treating the right things. And then again, measuring the impact of acoustic treatments, like looking to see if we're getting our reverb times down to something that's acceptable in a home theater environment. So just again, we're all about improving our sound. So I do want to give you a word of caution. It can be really easy to fall down the rabbit hole and just chase this dragon of a quote unquote perfect curve. A perfect curve doesn't exist in the real world. For those of us like me that don't have a purpose-built room, if we get within plus or minus 5 dB in a non-purpose-built room, that's pretty awesome. And I say plus or minus 5 dB, I mean plus or minus 5 dB from our target curve. A lot of things that you see in a curve really aren't as audible as you'd really think they were. Some of these really deep, really narrow peaks are so narrow, even though they look dramatic, you really can't hear them. It's kind of counterintuitive, but some wider peak, wider dips and wider nulls and depressions in sound can actually be more audible than really sharp nulls. So just something to think about. And then finally, what you like matters. Just because you know, there are guys out there that love a ton of bass, and they run their subs really hot, and they've got house curves programmed into their EQ that are, you know, 8, 10, 12 dB of boost in the lower frequencies. That's cool. I get it. And if you like that, that's what you should look. That's what you should look for, right? And you should use REW to figure out if you're getting what you want. You know, I prefer a little bit on the lower end, right? I think I've got a flat curve, a 3 dB curve, and a 6 dB curve for when I'm feeling a little froggy with something super actiony. So this is really a tool to help us again figure out what we're hearing, figure out what we like, and then figure out how to tune our system to deliver what we like. Just make sure you don't chase that flat curve, because otherwise you're never going to spend any time actually listening to your theater. You'll just be measuring all the time. So let's walk through the equipment. We've talked through the software a little bit already. Pretty straightforward there. You are going to need a calibrated microphone. We'll talk about that in detail here in the next slide. You are going to need a boom mic stand with a mic clip to actually hold the microphone. Don't try to do this with a tripod, or some microphones come with little bitty, you know, like 8-inch tall tripods. Those really aren't going to work very well. Boom mic stands are pretty cheap. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And then you obviously need a stereo system of some kind, or a home theater system of some kind to actually test against. So we're not going to go into that at all. I just wanted to be thorough in the equipment. So a calibrated mic, about $100. Why is calibration important? We really want to be able to accurately measure the entire frequency range. Some microphones aren't good at low frequencies. You'll commonly hear that in relation to like RTA or SPL meter apps that are built for phones, right? Those really don't do a good job of picking up the lower frequencies that are often targeted with Room EQ Wizard for things like subwoofer equalization. These microphones, because they're calibrated, they're also very accurate, and they can double as a really accurate SPL meter. So, you know, some people like to check or manually adjust levels after their Room EQ software has been run, and this is a great tool for that. In some instances, I know I use a processor that requires an external mic. It came with one, but that software also supports using the calibrated mic. So, you know, it can double up usage as well. I think it's a really good investment. You don't attempt to use the mic that came with your AVR or your processor. Number one, they aren't, I say they aren't. They're not as likely to be as precise as some of these purpose-built microphones are. And two, we have no access to the calibration file, so we don't know how accurate those things are actually going to work. So just spend the money. I've seen them as cheap as $80. I put in a little bit of a buffer there just to hedge. But I highly recommend the UMic one for Mini DSP. While I have not used it, I know a ton of people use the UMM6 from Dayton. So either of these are perfectly acceptable. They're both in the right price range, right in the same price range, and will get the job done for sure. You want a boom mic stand and a clip. This is almost I think this may be the exact one that I bought. I just grabbed a picture off of Amazon. It's $30 for the combo. We want a boom mic stand because we need to be able to freely position the mic in space without touching anything or creating any weird sound reflections. I have seen when I initially started calibrating my subs that some of the vibrations coming through the couch would set off, that would cause the mic to show some artificial readings. So we just want to make sure that we can freely position the mic. That way we're not getting any weird reflections off of a tripod or anything like that. Tripods are kind of a pain in the butt, particularly for listening positions. It might work okay on a couch, but if you've got home theater seats and you want to calibrate it for the reclined position, how are you going to get a tripod to work well in that position? And then last bit, these are also multi-use. These can be used with your Room EQ mic. That little clip that's shared there on the bottom right. They make tons of different attachments that you can buy for these mic stands, and you can use it actually to help get a little bit better results out of your Room EQ software. So again, $30, definitely worth it. So how does this all fit together? Well, we have a home theater system here on the right that's all drawn with some really janky lines. But this is a 7.1 example. The Room EQ Wizard side of things is basically everything to the left of the receiver over here. This says laptop. This could be a computer. I'm actually going to be running this I'm actually recording this video on an iMac. This is a macOS tutorial, so it's got to be something that runs macOS. Going to hook our laptop into our receiver to an open via HDMI to an open HDMI port over here, and then we're going to hook our microphone into our laptop or our computer with a USB port, right? So this is that area that we're concentrating in right here. So with that, I think that's actually the last little slide. Oh, it is, and we'll go ahead and jump into it. All right, so let's get into the actual setup of Rythmik Wizard on macOS. Just as a quick reminder, we're really concerned with the left-hand side of this. We're not going to be messing with home theater setup or anything like that. It's all about getting Rythmik Wizard set up on our Mac. Doesn't have to be a laptop. I mentioned that a few minutes ago, but in case you're coming in mid presentation, mid tutorial, we're only going to be concentrating on the left hand side of this. You can use any Mac you want. So just a quick note: Rythmik Wizard supports 8-channel configs max. This is a combination of up to 8 main speakers plus a sub, so that's a 7.1 config at the maximum. So we can't do like wides on a 9.1 dots point something. We can't do any of the more advanced 11.1 type configs. We can't do Atmos speakers. These aren't really a big deal. The vast majority of work that we do, or at least in my experience, the vast majority of work that I've done has been concentrating on the subs and the front three, the left, center, and right. You could actually measure Atmos speakers if you wanted to. It would involve moving some input cables around or potentially moving some speaker connections around to get measurements out of those speakers if you wanted to understand what you're hearing. But it is not something that REW supports out of the box with some of the channel selection stuff we're going to do. Again, not usually really a concern for anyone. I mentioned this in the intro. This is largely a walkthrough of Enrico Claudio's macOS guide for REW over on AVS Forum. It's really straightforward. We're just going to plug things in. We're going to verify some OS level settings for both our microphone and our HDMI connection. We're going to download and install Rythmik Wizard, and then we're going to configure it. So with that, I think we can go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you want to do is plug your microphone and your receiver or processor into your laptop or your iMac or whatever you're using. You're going to use an HDMI cable for your processor receiver. Some of them have ports on the front that makes it easy. Otherwise, you may have to use a port on the rear. I have to use a port on the back of mine. I don't have a front port. And then the mic is pretty straightforward for USB. My iMac actually only has, I don't have enough connections on it. And I don't have I don't have an HDMI connection. So I'm actually using a USB-C to like a multimedia converter that has USB-C, HDMI, USB-A, and then a little kind of a pass-through USB-C port. So that stuff should work no problem if you don't have the right connections on your machine. So once we have this, once we have our stuff plugged in, we're going to go into our system preferences, and we are going to open up our displays. One of the things that can happen, I already had mine plugged in when I started, but one of the things that can happen is when you plug stuff in, your display can kind of go all wonky. I fixed this on mine by optimizing for the built-in Retina display. You can optimize for your TV or your projector. You can even turn it off, whatever you want to do. Just this is where you go in and fix that in case it got to the point where you can't read it. Pretty easy, but I didn't want anyone to be confused if that changed and wasn't sure how to fix it. So you can adjust it there. The next thing that we want to do is we are going to go into our sound settings. So if we find sound right here, we'll open that up. We want to make sure that under the output, here at the top, it may open up and go straight to sound effects. You want to be on output. That we have our receiver, our processor listed. Depending on your version of macOS, depending on your particular hardware, this could say just about anything. Mine actually calls itself the JVL AV amp. My old Yamaha used to just say HDMI. So it could vary, but just make sure something shows up here. And then on the same thing on the input side, we want to make sure that our microphone appears properly here. I'm using a UMic 2. You might have a UMic 1. Total side note, not that the UMic 2 is a bad piece of gear, but it is absolute overkill for doing home theater work. So save your money on the UMic 2 and just go ahead and grab the UMic 1. That's why I mentioned only about $100 for that one. So those are set up there. And we are ready to go. So the next thing that we want to open, and I'm going to take you to a path on this one because this is not something that people open very often, is we want to open up the MIDI, audio MIDI settings. So if you go to applications, you can open up Finder, go to applications and utilities. Right here at the top, there's going to be an audio MIDI setup app, and that's the one that we want to open up next. So we'll go ahead and double click that, and it's going to have a bunch of different things in here. Yours may have more, yours may have less. I have a couple of microphones plugged into this, plus the built-in stuff, plus the receiver. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that shows up. The first thing that we want to check is on our UMic. So the UMic 1, if I remember correctly, has a default sample rate of 48 hertz or 48 kilohertz. So this should say 2-channel, 24-bit, 16-bit, the bit depth doesn't matter. We want to make sure that this says 48 kilohertz here on the right-hand side. If you hit the drop down, you're going to see all kinds of different things. Yours is going to be a little bit different, again, because I have a UMic 2, I have more sample rates. But just pick 2-channel, bit rate doesn't matter, make sure it's 48 kilohertz, okay? The next thing that we want to do is we want to find our processor. So remember, this is my processor, and we want to make sure that the output format is set properly. So this one, it does matter. We want to make sure we have 8 channels instead of 2 channels. And then we want to make sure that we have the 48 kilohertz as well. We want the 48 kilohertz to match, and we want the number of channels that we have to match as well. So that's what we want for that. And then the last thing we need to do in here is we need to configure our speakers. Mine are probably already configured, so let me show you what this looks like by default. And I personally prefer the top view, a little easier to see. In the top view, so we can see this set up to stereo with just two speakers. What we want to do is we want to set the correct speaker configuration for what we're going to be using. I think most people these days use a 7.1. You want to use a 7.1 rear surround because the rear surround will have surround backs. If you just use the regular 7.1 quote-unquote surround in macOS, it throws some presence speakers in the front or something like that. So just use the 7.1 rear surround settings. Once that's done, hit apply, hit done, and you can actually go ahead and close out the audio MIDI setup. And you can close out your utilities window if you have it open here. So that's that with the OS settings. It's a lot easier than on Windows. On Windows, there are some drivers that you have to install. There was a post just today, some folks struggling with some of those drivers and getting them to configure properly. So it is definitely a little bit easier on the Mac. So now let's move on to the next setting. We're going to go ahead and download REW Wizard. If you go to the REW Wizard website, it does have downloads here. But one thing to note is for macOS, if you're running version 10.14, so macOS Mojave or later, my machine is running, I don't remember what, I think I'm running Big Sur 11.5.1 or something like that. Yeah, Big Sur 11.5. So I'm going to have to go to get the latest beta version from AV Nirvana. So if you click the little link there, it will take you over to AV Nirvana. If I remember correctly, you will need to create an account here in order to be able to download REW Wizard. It's already got me logged in, so I can go ahead and download it. But then just find REW Wizard macOS DMG and just get the latest one that's out there. As of this video, it's release candidate 13B for version 5.20. I've already got it downloaded. So let's go over here to downloads. Oh, I don't have it downloaded. See, this is what I get for practicing this video more than once. So we'll go ahead and download it. Click the name, download button's up here in the right-hand side. Oh, I did have it downloaded in a different video. That's fine. Or a different location. That's fine. I'll go over there. Get it out on OneDrive. Videos, REW, getting started. All right, so we've got that downloaded, and we can go ahead and close this window, close this window. We'll minimize that guy. And let's go ahead and run this installer. Installer's really super simple, really straightforward. Run the app. Give this just a minute. We're going to take the defaults all the way through. There's no reason to, we will have to accept the agreement. There's no reason to change any defaults or anything. At the very end of this, it's going to have a little checkbox that says, hey, do you want to run REW? Leave that checked because that is definitely something that we want to do. We're going to go straight into Rythmik Wizard. So we'll hit finish. It's going to launch Rythmik Wizard. I'm going to take just a second to... I'm going to take just as well. No, we'll just keep right on going. So we can see it opened up Rythmik Wizard. It opens up the help file as well for us. But importantly, the cool thing is it says, hey, you've got I detected a U mic. Do you want me to use that for measurements? Yeah, let's use that for measurements. So let's go ahead and say yes. And then it's going to ask us for a calibration file. So remember earlier we talked about needing a calibrated mic. Calibrated mics come with a calibration file that tells the software using the microphone what sorts of offsets to use at different frequencies that for that particular microphone to get accurate results. So this is probably the most important thing to make sure that we do is make sure that we get the calibration mic loaded properly. We're going to do it here, and then we're going to double check it before we actually get ready to take any measurements. But we're going to go ahead and say, hey, yes, let's get a calibration file out there. And it's going to ask me where that calibration file lives. The calibration files are going to be available from whomever manufactured your mic. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'll show you what this looks like for a mini DSP. If I go to minidsp.com and I pick a mic, so this is UMic 1. I know I have UMic 2, and I'm just showing you for the UMic 1. If you scroll down, there's a calibration file download. You put in the serial number, hit submit, and it's going to download 2 files for you. Those files, which I have right here, there's 2 of them. I think this is part of a serial number if I remember correctly, but there's a 90-degree file, and then there's a regular file. So we're always going to use, for home theater, we're always going to use a 90-degree file. That's the calibration file to use when the microphone is pointed straight up at the ceiling, which is how we're going to be using it. So just so you can see what that looked like. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here to browse. This has got a little bit of a, I don't know if this is a bug, but I can't quite read the things. Where's my OneDrive? Got it in here somewhere. There we go. A little hard for me to... Theater, shooting videos, here, there, and it should be this. There we go. So I'm choosing navigated through, and here you can actually see it'll show, hey, at 10.054 hertz, you need to be down 3.9763 dB. And things also that it'll have like the sensitivity factor, these are all really critical things to make sure that you're getting accurate measurements. So just so you know what that is. So again, 90-degree file, select it, say open. It should have the name right here, and that's it. We're going to hit close. One of the things I'm going to do really quickly on my preferences, we're going to go into preferences together. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Let me make this a little bit bigger for everyone. I forget I recorded my entire screen here. Here we go. So on the top right-hand side, you can select this little preferences icon. Another way to get to that is just go to preferences up here at the top. So we want to adjust this and set this for what we need to use to measure. So the first thing is, you remember when we have our input device, our microphone, and then we have our output device, our receiver. And we went into some sound preferences and we made sure that those matched at 48 kilohertz. So under our sample rate, we want to make sure that that matches as well. So 48 kilohertz for the sample rate. The next thing that we want to do is we want to set our output device, because we want REW to use our AVR or our processor for sound output. So we're going to hit this in the dropdown, go find your receiver. Again, it could be the receiver processor name. It might just say HDMI. And on the that's the device. Now for the actual output, you want to make sure that it says speaker. Don't use default output. Make sure that it says speaker in this section. You can also verify that you're using the right thing. Once you select speaker here in this next little window where there's an R on mine, it might have something different. You should see all of the channels listed, which means, hey, we're good. We're seeing everything that we need. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to set the timing reference output channel. This is basically a default channel that it's going to use. An acoustic timing reference is critical to getting good usable measurements. If you're going to be importing this into third-party tools like Multi-Sub Optimizer, you have to have an acoustic timing reference. When you start getting into things like needing to align the phases of systems, like you want to make sure you've got that acoustic timing as part of your measurement. So go ahead and pick a channel here. Doesn't matter which channel it is, but you always want to use the same one. So I've just defaulted to using the left. You could use a surround speaker. Really doesn't matter which one you use, but just always use one and always use the same channel. So under input device, now we're going to go over here and configure the input side. Again, if it's not selected already, choose your microphone. I'm using the UMic 2. And much like we did on the output side, make sure that it is not set to default. Make sure that it is set to microphone. And that should be everything that we need to set here under preferences. The last thing that we want to double check is if you click Cal Files up here at the top, under UMic 2 microphone, there should be the calibration file that we chose earlier. So we just want to make sure that that is set. And if that's set, then we are good to go, and we're actually ready to go and take some measurements. So we'll give that here a shot here in the next segment.